Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first lesson. I hope that everybody is excited to listen to our first discussion today. So, our first topic for the prelim will be language and communication. So, let's start with defining what is language and what is communication. And in this topic, there will be two discussions. First will be for the nature of language. Second is the types of communication. Again, our subject is purposive communication, and I will be your subject teacher, Mrs. Rosalyn S. Balofinius, LPT MAED. So let's have first learning objectives. So at the end of the lesson, the students will be able to demonstrate understanding of the key ideas in language and communication, relate your personal experience with the input presented, demonstrate knowledge about the role of language in human communication, identify the types of communication in relation to communicate mode, context, and purposive style, differentiate verbal, nonverbal, and visual communication, and their subforms in relation to communication modes. Number 6 is evaluate the difference among intrapersonal, interpersonal, extended, cultural, organizational rather, and intercultural communication in relation to communication text. 7. Explain the differences between formal and informal communication in relation to purpose and style. And lastly, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the different communication types in various communication settings. So let's have first an activity. So this is a self-assessment. Are you familiar with the 10 words written in our table? So which do you think is correctly spelled? So you can put a check whether the word is correct or incorrect. So you may write it in any sheet of paper that you have right there. So if you're familiar with those words, maybe you can answer it. So I think partly you're done. So let's have a better discussion on this. Okay. So what can you see now? You can see that I put check in all the cells found in the table. But look at the first column. Okay, so as you can notice, there's just a typographical error on the number 1 and number 2, but nevertheless, the same is the answer. So here, as you can notice, first, there are two words, axe and axe. The first one ends with E, the second one doesn't end with E. But I put correct, incorrect. Okay, so the explanation to this one is British English and American English are the principal varieties in English. So in terms of numbers of speakers worldwide. So these are the um, principal English in which we are engaged engaged globally. So certain spellings formerly used only in American English have now been adapted also into into British English. So for example, axe. So there are words in British that ends with E, but as you go to American English, it doesn't have E. Words in British ending in once it ends with SE, ISE, it's British, but in American, it's IZE. The same with defense. If it ends with ENC, that's British. And ENSE, that's American. So the same with the word enrollment. 1L is British, 2L is an American English. Honor with U, that's British. Honor without Q is an American English. So therefore, what is language? So according to linguists, they agree that a language can only be called language if it has a system of rules known as grammar, a system of sound known as phonology, and a vocabulary lexicon. So a language will not be complete unless there's grammar, there's phonology, and there is lexicon or vocabulary. So together with the creation of human life is also the creation of a wonderful and dynamic human capacity known as language. So animals are said to be able to communicate with each other. Whales sing, wolves howl, dogs bark, and birds chirps. The sound these creatures produce often reflect the state of their emotions. While it may be true that animals communicate, only human beings are truly capable of producing language. So, meaning to say, language will not be a language unless it has a complete package. So what happens if people visit another speech community that is different from their own? So Americans and British speak English, right? However, they spell English words differently. So that the same as with our first activity. They pronounce words differently. They have different ways of expressing the same concepts. It can be said that the Americans and the British belong to two speech community which do not have exactly the same set of rules of their language. This is why there are differences in their languages. The opening activity on the previous page illustrates this reality. Now, what happens if you, for example, who speaks a mother tongue and English, go to work in China, where the residents speak Mandarin and a little bit of English? Will you able to communicate with the Chinese? What's your answer? Okay, so the answer is yes. Though it will be a challenge for you and your Chinese friends to try understand each other, eventually, class, you will be able to communicate as you slowly learn each other's language. What is happening here is called language contact. So the result of such contact may be a new form of language, or it is possible that in your attempt to communicate with each other, you and your Chinese friends will produce a new language, a new language form that is understandable to both of you. Your own languages may also change as you constantly interact and communicate with each other. Thus, language change is the result of language contact. So again, magkakaintindihan ba kayo? Kahit hindi ka masyadong nagsasalita ng Mandarin but you know a little bit of English? Of course, yes. So meaning to say, language is indeed a complex human capacity. It is therefore important to be aware of its features and behavior to be able to use language more effectively and productively in communicating with others. That is why our OFWs, those who are going abroad, undergo a language training before they will be deployed to other countries. So let's have a reflection. Can animals communicate? Can monkeys produce language? What is the difference between language acquisition and language learning? What is the difference between first language and second language? What happens after a language comes into contact with another? You can take note of the following questions, and based on our previous discussion, try to relate it and understand, reflect. I might ask this again in our next session or during our recitation. Now let's go to our definition on communication. So we're done with the language. Let's go with communication. So this is generally defined as the exchange of thoughts, ideas, concepts, and views between or among two or more people in a various context. So, context is the circumstance or environment in which communication takes place. So, such circumstance may include the physical or actual setting, the value positions of the speaker, the listener, and the relevance or appropriateness of message conveyed. It focuses on certain communication processes and even groupings of people that constitute a communication situation. So, communication depends on the situation. So, communication is a term takes on different contexts, resulting in people having different views on communication types. So, eventually, tama yun. There is an exchange of thoughts, ideas, but still it varies. It will vary depending on the context, depending on the people you are talking, depending on the place in which you are also talking. Halimbawa, pag ayaw mo sa kausap mo, no, naiinis ka sa kanya, kakausapin mo ba siya ng maayos? Of course, not. Pag maingay ang isang lugar, gusto mong makipag-usap sa nililigawan mo, sa tingin mo makakapanligaw ka na maayos? Of course, not. So meaning to say, it's still varied. It would still depend on the context, on the circumstance. Now let's go with the types of communication according to mode. So we have this verbal and nonverbal communication. We have the visual communication. So let's start with the verbal and nonverbal communication. So I think you will believe that effective communication calls for the blending of these two types. Importante ang may verbal, importante ang nonverbal. For instance, door-to-door salespersons who demonstrate product knowledge can only be effective if they know how to properly punctuate what they say with proper gestures and facial expressions. So for example, you are selling a certain product. Will it be enough that you only talk about the product without smile, without hand gestures? Of course, that will be ineffective. So you need to use your speaking skills. But of course, apart from it, there should also be good gestures, facial expressions. Pag ako bibentahan mo, hindi ka ngingiti, hindi rin ako bibili. Ganun lang yun siya. So their communication with the customer begins upon greeting him or her with a welcoming smile, then assessing customer's need and answering customer queries, enhanced by gestures and a friendly, happy, and pleasant disposition. So it is only through this mode that the salespeople with excellent communication skills are able to provide the best information needed. Therefore, convincing the client to patronize their products. So rather than just speaking, it is to use the nonverbal code through a handshake. Pero bawal pa ngayon kasi nga may pandemya. An approving facial expression and a kind disposition or character. So another type of communication according to mode is visual communication. So visual communication, on the other hand, is a type of communication that uses visuals to convey information or messages. So what are the examples? So signs, symbols, imagery, maps, graphs, what else? Charts. It could also be diagrams, pictograms, photos, drawings, or illustrations, and even various forms of electronic communication. Some examples of electronic communication symbols or images are, ito kadalasan ginagamit, emojis or emoticons, animations, among others, to convey the writer's emotions or clarify the intent of the message sender. So, aside from the letters, aside from the words, there are illustrations na meron pang nakikita, and that can be under visual communication. Sometimes, people tend to become lazy in reading already, so they prefer to have only the illustrations rather than words. So these are achieved through digital mode or text. So how these symbols are interpreted is very crucial in visual communication. There are some instances when visual communication is under nonverbal communication. Whatever the classification is, note that this type has now become pervasive in communication. Yes, it's true. Especially today that we are in the Generation Z population already. So more of our clients, our netizens, citizens right now are involved with the use of gadgets. It is then important that the receiver of the message is able to decode the meaning correctly by contextualizing the information received. So we're done with types of communication according to mode. Let's go with types of communication according to context. So we have here intrapersonal communication, interpersonal communication, we have extended communication, organizational communication, and intercultural communication. So what is this intrapersonal communication? So the Latin prefix intra means within or inside. So intrapersonal communication means talking to oneself. Baliw ka ba nito? Are you fool? You talk to yourself, but then there's still communication? Hindi naman, no? Some label it as a self or inner talk, inner monologue, or inner dialogue. Have you tried talking also to yourself sometimes? Okay, so I think I tried that one also, no? Psychologists call it with other names such as self-verbalization or self-statement. There are times that if you have no one to talk with, you just talk to yourself, look at the mirror. For example, gagawa ka ng isang bagay and then no one is boosting you, no? So you just keep on telling, kaya mo yan, kaya mo yan. That is already a self-verbalization or a self-statement. So do you find it normal to talk to yourself? Yes, some say it's yes, some say it's not. So they gauge, however, the rest on the frequency of the occurrence and how you handle such, of course. Depende sa occurrence. Kung araw-araw na siya, minuminuto, oras-oras, kinakausap mo sarili mo, that's already something is wrong. There is really no need for you to answer back. You talk to yourself because you think there is the need. Boost your confidence. O kagaya ng sabi ko kanina, it could be appraise yourself that you perform a good job, or console yourself that you did a task poorly. So moreover, engaging in inner speech such as fantasizing or daydreaming is not bad as long as you are able to distinguish it from reality. So, ang mahirap doon, you don't know already what is fantasy and what is reality. So, baka may schizophrenia ka na, may dual disorder ka na. So, that's different already. As long as you just use it to boost your confidence, to help you develop as a human, that's okay. So, self-talk can be advantageous sometimes. Saying, I can do it to yourself, no? I can do it. Saying, ang ganda mo, kahit hindi ka maganda, no? It boosts your confidence, okay? So, let's go with interpersonal communication. As opposed to intra, the Latin prefix inter means among and together. So, an interactive exchange takes place as interpersonal communication takes place. So, this one naman, intra is a self-verbalization, self-statement. This one naman, it is engaging with other people. So, ever, as it occurs, a transaction does not necessarily takes place since it can only be a simple interaction such as greetings, getting to know a person, or ordinary conversations that happen between or among the interactants. This may occur in dyads or small groups, also known as group communication. So another term niya is group communication because you are interacting with other people as well. Pwedeng mag-isa, pwedeng marami, no, small, pwedeng big group. So it's an interpersonal communication. A communication situation is interpersonal if it is meant to establish or deepen one's relationship with others. So for example, gusto mong makipag-MOA with a certain company, of course, you need to build a good interpersonal communication. So if you want to gain many friends in a certain company, you need to boost out your interpersonal communication. If you're a new head of a certain company and you want your subordinates to respect and follow you, you need to develop as well this interpersonal communication. So they said that leaders are interpersonally intelligent. So meaning to say they are good with people. While the former, I always say the intrapersonal is characterized with less seriousness and formality, the latter is more formal and profound, whereas the interpersonal talks are meant for maintaining social relationships, um, transactional talks, aim to accomplish or resolve something at the end of the conversation. Okay. Next is the extended communication. So extended communication involves the use of electronic media. So unlike before, when it only called for the use of television and radio, nowadays, the description of extended communication may be expanded to include teleaudio or phone conferencing. We already have the video conferencing. We have the Skype calls. We have the through Messenger already, and other technological means. May Google Meet na tayo ngayon, di ba? So for example, linked by a telecommunication system, people who are far apart or far from the venue can participate in a meeting or a conference. So if for example, we do the meeting through Zoom, discussing using the Zoom, we do already the extended communication. So, in an e-conference like this, participants may not be physically present but are still able to track down the lectures and participate actively because of the mass articulation and dissemination of information, so allowing speakers to reach a wider group of listeners. Since extended communication is public in nature, so speakers are able to be prepared when they speak, making their language more formal. So with this use of electronic media, messages are transmitted quickly. Hindi kagaya dati that when you transact to a certain company, you need the only way is either there's an appointment to make, or you you send a business proposal, no? So letter will be given. So with the use of the internet, recorded videos may be transmitted in seconds or minutes and may be viewed by a greater number of people with extended communication. But then it still depends on the internet signal. Another type of communication according to context is organizational communication. So organizational communication is a system of communication with set of rules or standard for protocols. So organizations comprise individuals who work for a company. So when you graduate, for example, you become a professional, either working in a company or putting up your own business. So for an organization to be successful, a system of communication should be put in place. So meaning to say, there should be rules or standards for communication protocol that should be made clear so that interaction patterns are established. So these patterns are categorized according to approaches. We have the formal and informal. So with the formal one, I will be highlighting the formal one. We have the downward communication. So communication flows from upper to lower position. So it could be either from the president going to the employees, no, from the supervisors to the employees. So from the higher position going to the lower positions. Upward communication from Upward communication is from bottom to top. So this happen if there are strikes, no, because it will start from the union, the set of the employees going to the higher authorities. Next is horizontal communication. It is a lateral in approach as it takes place among people belonging to the same level but coming from different departments. So itong horizontal communication, these are communication of the different heads. Okay, coming from the different department, meaning to say, they are on the same level of position, particularly higher position. Pag crosswise communication naman, diagonal in nature usually, these are communication coming from the employees of the different departments. So, meaning to say, ang horizontal, mga bosses, no? Mga managers, presidents, sila yung nag-uusap. Pag crosswise naman, mga empleyado. Pag sinabi nating intercultural communication naman, this is a type of communication between or among people having different linguistic, religious, ethnic, social, and professional background. So, take note, even gender difference affects communication. So, for example, Australians consider eye contact as important in assessing the sincerity of a person. But for the Indians, looking straight into the eyes of a person while talking is inappropriate o magkaiba, no? Even in Filipinos, it is important that as we talk with people, with a certain people, importante na merong eye contact. But for the Indians, is not. Pero it doesn't mean that they're dishonest or insincere, I think. Another is waving of hands for Indians. For Indians, it means go away or no. But for us Filipinos, it means hi or hello. So it is important then not to be judgmental or to rush into interpretations as cultures sometimes vary enormously. So let's go with types of communication. Let's go to the types of communication according to purpose and style. So we have the formal communication and informal communication. So simple lang. Pag formal communication, it is using a formal language. At usually, ginagamit ito sa mga lectures, public talks, speeches, research, project proposals, reports, business letters, lahat ng mga formal na sitwasyon. It could either be through written or oral. Informal communication naman, It involves personal, ordinary conversation with friends, family, close friends mo, kapitbahay mo, acquaintances mo. The mode may be oral as in face-to-face, pwedeng ordinary, yung nasa kanto lang kayo nagkita, no? Or pwedeng nag-usap kayo through phone, or pwedeng sulatan lang din. Pwede rin sa email, messages, personal notes, no? Meron pa yung iba, no? Maalala ko dati, wala na kaming ballpen na mahanap, so we just write the letter through using the leaf, no? The purpose is the simply lang purpose. This is to socialize and enhance communication. So those are the types of communication. So to sum up, language is a human capacity that consists of a system of rules, phonology, and vocabulary. So while growing up in a community, people acquire the language used by those in the community. So this is the process of language acquisition. So the languages acquired while growing up are known as mother tongues, which may referred as first language. Other than the first language, there are other languages that are needed for various reasons. The other languages are known as second language. People learn their second language in school on their own. This is the process of language learning. So in our interaction with other people, our languages come into contact with their languages, resulting in language change. So language change is a natural behavior of all languages. So there are types of communication. These types can be divided according to mode, context, purpose, and style. So verbal and nonverbal codes should complement each other. So with visual communication, interpretation of signs and symbols is crucial since people have different ways of interpreting them. So in any organization, a system of communication should be put in place. So transmission of message and message flow play an important role in effective organizational communication. So people have different linguistic, religious, ethnic, social, and professional backgrounds. So formal communication and informal communication have different uses depending on the situation. So both types may be oral or written mode. So hoping that you have learned things from our topic today. So this is my reference. You can check that one. Okay, so I've used the purposive communication by Madrunio and Martin. So thank you so much for attending our class session today. See you on our next lesson. Basta Humanista, Tata Corbel. Basta Corbelian, dare to challenge your destiny.